Alright, this is IMAX Nation 1980 here, and here's the rest of my Beatles solo albums. I don't have the sleeve for McCartney 2, I just have the inner sleeve, unfortunately. But that's okay, I'll get a copy of it soon with the sleeve. Now here's an interesting record, the McCartney interview. This was an interview with Paul McCartney from 1980, and it was released as an LP in 1981. This is actually the British copy, as you could see. It's on Parlophone, and it's in very good condition. I actually listened to the interview, and he points out some very interesting things over the course of the interview. We got Tug of War, fan favorite, and a critic's favorite. Got good reviews when it came out. Nice cover. I have a carbon copy of it. Flowers in the Dirt. This album features Elvis Costello in some sections on some of the songs. This record came out in 1989, so that makes it one of the latest vinyl albums that is in my collection. I think I didn't go any later than 1990, I'm not too sure. Alright, if you can notice, my George Harrison collection is woefully lacking, which is a shame. I should have All Things Must Pass, but I don't. Yet. So far I have George Harrison, just the self-titled album from '79. And this is actually a pretty good album. It's underrated in a way. And it features like Steve Winwood and Eric Clapton on some of the songs, and I think Gary Wright is also on here too. And it also has Not Guilty, which was originally a song that George did with the Beatles for the White Album. You can hear that in an abridged version of his recording on Anthology 3. And Here Comes the Moon, of course, the sequel to Here Comes the Sun. Pretty neat. He did a couple other songs like that were kind of like sequels to his Beatles songs. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Extra Texture had a song called This Guitar Can't Keep From Crying or something like that. Here's Cloud 9. Back in 1987, it was like a return to form for him. Had Got My Mind Set on You and When We Was Fab. Finally, my only Ringo Starr album, Ringo, featuring contributions from the other former Beatles, and they can be seen on the cover there in the background. It's a nice cover too. It's a great album. This is actually an early pressing. Track 2 is actually called Have You Seen My Baby, but it was called Hold On early pressings of the album. It's pretty interesting nonetheless. The next part of my record collection, like the Beatles, the Beach Boys have their own section in the collection. And one thing, I don't have many notable Beach Boys albums. I mean, I have quite a couple, but I need really important Beach Boys albums like Pet Sounds and Sunflower, Surf's Up. So I'm going to show you what I have for now. This is Beach Boys Concert. And this is a mono copy, but it's in pretty bad condition. Here's a later pressing of it, and you can tell because the Capitol logo is the one from the late 60s going into the mid 70s. And it's sealed. It's in pretty nice condition. Best of the Beach Boys. This one is actually sealed, unopened. Got it at a record store not knowing that it was unopened. Maybe I'll just frame it. Best of the Beach Boys, Volume 2. That's a carbon copy. It's from a sticker. Don't mind that. Really. Long Tall Texan was such a big hit that it had to be included on this best of set. At least it has Let 'Em Run Wild on there. That's a favorite of mine. Here we got Smiley Smile. Of course, most of you Beach Boys fans will know about this. After Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys set out to do an ambitious project called Smile. The project, you know, was really revolutionary, and Brian Wilson, he was really ahead of his time when he was recording the album. But unfortunately, it fell through, and I'm not going to get into it. It's a pretty long story. Instead, remnants of it went onto this album, while newly recorded material was put on here. And it didn't do so well when it first came out, but it's actually a pretty decent album. It's quirky, and it's unlike most Beach Boys albums, but that's why I think it's good. It's so different. I mean, it still has pieces of Smile on there, like Heroes and Villains, and of course there's Good Vibrations on there. And some of the tracks like Vegetables and Wonderful were re-recorded versions of the Smile counterparts. And you had some nonsensical tracks on there that were also pretty neat, like She's Going Bold and Little Pad. And the tunes on here, they're all quirky, and Fall Breaks and Back to Winter is probably the best song on the album. It's also on Brother Records, but it's an interesting album nonetheless. Here we got Wild Honey, which was quickly recorded for a December release right after Smiley Smile had come out in September of 1967. And this is actually the British version of Wild Honey. So it has like a copyright 1968 date on it, because the UK version of Wild Honey came out in March 1968. And this is a great album. It's, you know, the Beach Boys, they kind of go their own way this time around. And some people call it like the Beach Boys soul album or like R&B album. And there's definitely some R&B influences on the album, but it was a lot more straightforward than the previous Beach Boys albums. And a lot of the tunes were very fast, and they're very good though. They still have a rich sound to them. And this is also a mono copy. As you can see here, it's in mono. Best of the Beach Boys, Volume 3, which didn't do well at all in the States. I think this was released the same exact day as Stacco Tracks. I could be wrong. Interesting Beach Boys album, that is. The Beach Boys in Concert. Now, this album came out in 1973, when Brian Wilson was not in the band, and members Blondie Chaplin and Ricky Fatar. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, or Fader Fatar, right there. But you still had Al Jardine, Carl and Dennis Wilson, and Mike Love. And there's some classics on here like Surfin' USA, and there's also some tracks from Carl and the Passions and Holland. And there's even a couple tracks from Pet Sounds on there, along with some Wild Honey tracks. It's a pretty interesting live album. Endless Summer, which was a compilation album, it was a double album set, and it actually hit #1. And Spirit of America, the follow-up, in 1975. I have a lot of compilations. I gotta get more studio albums. I've been working on it, though. I like the selection of songs on Spirit of America. There's a lot of hits on here, but there's also a lot of, you know, deeper cuts on here. Kind of like the Rolling Stones' Hot Rocks and More Hot Rocks. The first Hot Rocks album had lots of well-known Stones hits, and More Hot Rocks had a lot of hits, but also some of the more deeper cuts that weren't as popular. You got the Beach Boys, 20 Golden Greats. This is a UK compilation album. As you can see, it's imported. This was a big seller in the UK. There's so many Beach Boys compilations. Even a lot of unofficial ones. I have one. It's on Exact Records. It's called the Beach Boys Jan and Dean, but I've excluded it from this video because I have it in another section of the collection. Various artists. And we got the Beach Boys self-titled album from 1985. It had Get You Back on it, which was a minor hit for them. I think it's actually a pretty catchy song. And this one's still got the shrink on it, but it's opened, of course. Alright, so that was all my Beach Boys albums. This is IMAX Nation 1980, signing off.